Happy Friday, everybody. We survived another week, although if we sat through that monstrosity of a game last night, you may not be feeling too great going into this morning, but here we are. This is Britt's Fantasy Blitz. I'm your host, Britt Flinn. It's great to see you guys all in here. Remember to get your start sits in the chat. Anne's already in here. And yes, I did survive the disaster of a game, although my stomach hurt a little bit and still hurt this morning over it. It's not very good. We'll get into that later on. We'll talk about the Thursday night game. We'll talk the stardom synonyms for this week, some week 11 bold predictions, and I want to hear your bold predictions, as well as talk about our top sleeper picks going into week 11. Thank you so much to our producer, Tony LaBarbera. Really happy to have him in here. But with that said, let's just get into it because, as we mentioned, last night was a crazy game. It was plagued with injuries beginning from the very, very start. I mean, you've got Mark Andrews going out in the first quarter with what is now thought to be a season ending leg injury. Then Lamar Jackson's limping around, not once, but twice. He gave us a couple scares. And although he did come back, he didn't exactly look like the best. He took off running when I thought that he maybe shouldn't have. And the big story is that Joe Burrow left the game with an apparent hand injury. Odell Beckham Jr. also injured his shoulder. So it was just a mess all the way around. The NFL today has also come out per Adam Schefter and said that they are investigating as to why Joe Burrow was not on the injury report after a video was quickly posted and deleted of him wearing a wrist support device coming off the bus. And then he ended up leaving the game with a similar injury. So just a little fishy there, something to watch out for. I don't really I hope it's not an Arthur Smith situation where they just catfished us and knew about something that they didn't tell us about because that would have changed everything. But we'll keep an eye on that. And with the win, the Ravens do remain atop the AFC North and most importantly, the AFC as a whole. So we'll be watching them. Good morning, Mr. Scampers. Hi, Angie. Hi, Sellers. Great to see you guys in the chat. As always, really appreciate y'all being here. But let's go into a couple quick stats for the Bengals. Joe Mixon was pretty much the star of the night, if you can call anybody from the Bengals a star. 16 carries, 69 yards, had another 5 receptions for 31 and a touchdown. Of course, this was the night that he would choose to be efficient against a good run defense because I picked the less on his rushing yards prop. But what are you going to do when your quarterback goes out? You can't predict that kind of thing. The ball was definitely also spread around on the Bengals side with Tanner Hudson, Trenton Irwin, Drew Sample, all of these guys leading the way. Then you have Jamar Chase, their star wide receiver, with only 2 catches for 12 yards. Although he did sort of salvage it with a touchdown, it was just not a great game for him, especially with Marlon Humphrey being out. We expected a lot more from him. And of course, as we mentioned, Joe Burrow left in the first half, only getting 101 yards and a touchdown. It is an apparent wrist sprain, but why was he playing with it in the first place? And why wasn't it mentioned before the game? Because I am so tired of coaches hiding things. That's the reason that these rules were put into place in the first place, because coaches, specifically Bill Belichick, would fudge the report so much that you never actually knew what the situation was and who was going to play and who wasn't. Now, with the rise in popularity of fantasy football, all the other gambling and betting aspects around it, we have to have this clarity. It's kind of becoming a pattern in the NFL over the past couple weeks with Arthur Smith and with Zach Taylor not disclosing this injury to Joe Burrow. And it's definitely not a good look, to say the least. So I'll just step off my soapbox and leave it at that. Jake Browning, the replacement quarterback, looked decent as you can, I guess. Went 8 of 14 for 68 yards and a touchdown. Now on the Ravens side, Mark Andrews was set up to have a huge night. The Bengals are one of the worst teams in the league against the tight end and went out on the first drive of the night. As a Mark Andrews manager, it just really ruined the rest of the game for me. Lamar Jackson passed okay, 16 of 26, 264 and 2 touchdowns with another 54 yards on the ground. With those rushing yards, though, he also passed Randall Cunningham for fourth all time in quarterback rushing yards. And with that big contract, I think that we can see him continue to move up those ranks by the time his career is said and done. Gus Edwards also had a nice night. 12 for 62 with 2 touchdowns. I see Deadpool Raider in the chat. I am playing Gus Edwards against him in our match this week. So I was very, very happy with those 2 touchdowns that Gus Edwards put up for me. And unfortunately, he also had Mark Andrews. So Deadpool Raider, I apologize. It's nothing personal. Keaton Mitchell, though, our waiver wire darling, only had 34 yards on 8 carries. He did have 1 reception for 8 yards. Odell Beckham was the star, 4 for 116, and everyone else was just kind of sprinkled in with nothing really of note. I selfishly wish that Zay Flowers' touchdown hadn't been called back because I did have him sprinkled in a couple of places. Um, yeah. So we'll see. We'll see. Let's answer a question in the chat. I know I saw one down here. And again, it's always hard to move my cursor because it's the same color. Anne asks, need one running back and 2 flex in PPR. Najee, Ty, I'm assuming Ty Chandler, Brandon Cooks, Curtis Samuel, and Michael Wilson. So I think that I'm actually going to go Ty Chandler here. Najee Harris going up against the Browns. I think that that game is going to be disgustingly ugly. We'll talk about him as a sit a little while later in the show. But I really like Ty Chandler's usage. Madison has been practicing, but still hasn't completely cleared protocol. So I think I would roll with him. Brandon Cooks and Curtis Samuel also really like them. Michael Wilson is a stash, of course, with Kyler Murray back, but it is going to take some time for them to develop some chemistry and get going together. And also asks Russ or Baker, Howell or Herbert. That is a good one. I think I'm going to go Russ over Baker. Baker has a very tough matchup against the 49ers. And again, we'll get into it with the sits. And I think I'm going to go with Sam Howell against the Giants. People are a little bit worried about Sam Howell this week just because they think that they're such heavily favored that they're going to pull him. Well, Coop said this in his last show in Coop's Fantasy Fiasco that you have to score the points first before you get pulled. And by the time that Dak got pulled last week, he had already put up 400 yards. With the way that the Commanders throw the ball, it's a sky high ceiling for Sam Howell this week. So let's move on to a little bit of news going around the NFL. With some news earlier this week that Deshaun Watson is undergoing season ending shoulder surgery, the Browns are hosting Joe Flacco to work him out and see if he can be an option at quarterback for the rest of the season. How stupid do you think that they feel as an organization getting rid of Joshua Dobbs before the season now that he crushed it in Arizona and he's now crushing it in Minnesota? I think we could spend hours talking about how Cleveland's front office has mismanaged their franchise, but this one, whew, it's recent and it hurts. Jaguars head coach Doug Peterson has admitted that the Jaguars offense has been somewhat limited by the health of quarterback Trevor Lawrence. He also said that the offensive line wasn't cohesive enough to get the run game going because they hadn't played together enough. We know that there have been some injuries, but dude, like excuses, excuses, excuses. Just get this thing going. You have you're in your second year with this franchise. Get it going. Y'all have looked discombobulated, and you never know what you're going to get with the Jaguars. Quarterback Josh Allen also puts the blame on himself for Ken Dorsey's firing. And yes, while he has made some costly interceptions, I don't think that you decided to bench your best running back for 3 consecutive possessions. Did you, Josh? No. Beating yourself up is only going to get your head in more in your head in more crucial games down the line. So um, don't blame yourself, Josh. It's not your fault. Let's answer some of these questions. And as always, I'll let you get your pen and paper as we go through injury news because there are a lot of updates that have happened today. Deadpool Raider asks, who are you suggesting Mark Andrews owners pick up for the rest of season? Likely is nice, but with a week 13 bye, you'd need to pick up 2. Yeah, and we thought of Likely as the quote unquote handcuff for Mark Andrews as far as you can be a handcuff for a tight end. But in week 1, we were all expecting him to have this great game, and he didn't. His usage wasn't even there. So I'm not even sure that Likely is that guy. It pretty much depends on who you've got in your league, because they're all over the place as far as ownership goes. But somebody with a softer schedule going forward, I think honestly is Trey McBride. If Trey McBride is still available by some miracle out there on waivers, you should go grab him I think that with Kyler Murray back, he gets a huge bump. He also asks, I'm also curious what you think about Fournette and his addition to the Bills. I thought that he would already be out there playing because their running game has struggled all season long. I thought that he would be kind of that in between the tackles, bruiser back, low efficiency, but still get the job done, especially at the goal line. And I'm a little shocked that they have not worked him in yet. So we'll have to see going down the stretch, especially in some of these really, really tough games. They have the third toughest strength of schedule moving forward for the rest of the year. Lex, great to see you. Due to buys, you have to play Charbonnet at running back. Should I drop him to play Khalil Herbert or Tajay Spears, or is Charbonnet too valuable to drop? I think Charbonnet is too valuable to drop because even though Kenneth Walker has gotten these receptions and his stat line looks better on paper, Charbonnet has outsnapped him. He's gotten close to, if not a few more carries than him. And his value in the passing game is going to be real big going forward. So hold on to him. We still don't know how that Bears backfield is going to play out because Donta Foreman played pretty well in Herbert's absence. Tajay Spears is more of a game script situation where if they're behind, sure, they'll use him, but he's not a reliable week to week basis. So I would still hold on to Charbonnet. Lastly, Ann needs one wide receiver and one flex in PPR. B Rob, Singletary, Ridley, or Rasheed. Definitely going Rasheed here with the Eagles' pass defense just being completely horrendous and allowing all the points in the world. And one flex, I think I'm going to go with Brian Robinson against the Giants. If you look at their injury report, almost everyone on their defense, especially the linebacker core, is listed as questionable for this game. They've already been terrible against the run. They've already given up a ton of fantasy points. I think that B Rob is going to have another huge day. Finally, is it time to cut bait on these Panthers running backs? And what about Ridley in Jacksonville? Yeah, the Panthers running backs, I thought that maybe the changing coach or the play calling with Thomas Brown would change things a little bit because he was one of the guys in the initial video saying that they wanted to get Miles Sanders passes and be worked into the receiving game, but they just haven't, and they can't get issues figured out on the offensive line. Nobody respects the pass. It's just not a good look. And Ridley in Jacksonville, it goes back to Doug Peterson. Is it the health of Trevor Lawrence? Is it the offensive line giving up too many pressures? Or is it that Ridley just worked better out of the slot and as the wide receiver too, as he did in Atlanta? And now Christian Kirk has that role. So he's on my bench, not feeling great about it, especially as he was one of my flag plants. Let's move on to some injury news here real quick. So for the Cardinals, we're just going to go through team by team. Amari DiMercado was limited Thursday with a toe injury. Just before the show kicked off, I got a notification saying that he was not spotted at practice. So that is definitely not trending in the right direction for him to play. I know that James Conner is back, but if you just had him and had to play him by, out of necessity, it's not looking good. For the Panthers, Hayden Hurst was in concussion protocol, was just ruled out. Cornerback CJ Henderson is also ruled out for Sunday's game against the Cowboys. Not looking great for them. For the Bears, Khalil Herbert was a full participant in Thursday's practice, with Donta Foreman limited with an ankle injury. The Browns, again, Deshaun Watson placed on injured reserve. Dorian Thompson-Robinson, the rookie out of UCLA, will get the start. And again, this game could just be so ugly. The Cowboys' Peyton Hendershot practiced in full Thursday and is expected to come off IR. Now, while I don't think that we're starting Hendershot in any formats, it could affect Jake Ferguson's snap share going forward just a little bit, so be cognizant of that. For the Broncos, Jerry Jeudy was limited in practice Thursday with a hip injury. He hasn't really done much this season, but he's, been fine as a flex option, so something to watch there. For the Packers, Christian Watson and Aaron Jones were both limited in practice Thursday. For the Houston Texans, wide receiver Nico Collins has been limited and is questionable for Sunday, with Noah Brown already being ruled out. So this could be another big, big day for Tank Dell. For the Jaguars, Zay Jones was limited Thursday. He hasn't played in forever. I don't think that anybody is really looking at Zay Jones, but just in case you have him like in a dynasty or something. For the Chargers, Keenan Allen revealed that he does have an AC joint sprain in his shoulder, but he has told reporters that he will play Sunday. So wheels up for Keenan Allen. He's been just one of the best receivers in all of football and has a good matchup this week. For the Miami Dolphins, Raheem Mostert is limited, but fellow running back Devon Achane is expected to return from injured reserve. As to whether or not he's going to play, Mike McDaniel said that he's looked good in practice, but he's not 100% sure. So he's giving us a little bit of that coach speak there, saying that he has to see what happens in practice today before he declares him active. For the Minnesota Vikings, Alexander Madison practiced on a limited basis Thursday, as did TJ Hawkinson. Justin Jefferson is also back on the field, but it's unclear whether he'll play this week or sit out one more just to get completely healthy. On the Giants, I'm not even going to go through all the names. Basically, everybody is limited. Everybody's questionable. It is not looking good for them. Normally, I would not feel great about the Washington spread, but in this instance, I do. Everybody's hurt. For the Jets, Garrett Wilson remains limited at practice, but he also said that he plans to play Sunday. For the Steelers, Pat Fryermuth is expected to make his return this week, but it is against the Cleveland Browns, so not the best matchup for him. But hey, at least he's back. Finishing up here, Tyler Lockett didn't practice Thursday for the Seahawks with a hamstring injury, which is never great late in the week. And for the Commanders, running back Antonio Gibson has been downgraded to doubtful, while Curtis Samuel should play. So that's all of our injuries. Hope you got all of that down. If you didn't, you can rewatch on the YouTube app or the YouTube channel later. But speaking of apps, have y'all tried the Bettercast app yet? I talk about it every single week, and it is so much fun. Not only are we talking about NFL games, we are answering questions and interacting with all of our, community during NFL games. Now they've put out trivia. We've got NBA, we've got NHL. I mean, it is just everything that we've got going on in the Bettercast. And it's free and you can win prizes, which is great. I've already sent mine in to redeem for a Cowboys sweatshirt. So y'all will definitely see me wearing that on the show often. So to get the Bettercast app, download it in the Apple or Google Play stores, or I believe that we have a QR code. If we do, we'll pop it up on screen. And you can scan that and get that downloaded as well. Speaking of other stuff that's really cool, we've still got our Fantasy Alarm All Pro subscription running through, and the All Pro subscription covers everything. It's all of our tools, all of our write ups, all of our matchups, all sports, everything that you need is all in one place and in one package. To sign up, go to fantasyalarm.com/win to sign up today and use promo code Let's Go for 50% off your first monthly payment. So now that we've got our administrative stuff covered, I think I see a couple questions here in the chat. I'm scrolling down. Great to see you. Hey, Brett, should I trade Tyler Lockett and Gabe Davis for David Montgomery? You have Amon-Ra, DJ Moore, Devonta Smith, and Jordan Addison. I'm a little thin at running back. Yeah, I think that actually would be a decent trade. Gabe Davis is just so boom or bust, and they're facing the Jets again this week, which is not a great matchup for him at all. And then Lockett has that hamstring injury. I know that you've still got to contend with Jahmyr Gibbs with Montgomery, but I think that the Lions can actually support two top running backs in that offense. And last week they showed that they did. So I think that that's a good trade, especially if you are already thin at running back. Let's see who else is in here. Yes, Deadpool Raiders playing me this weekend in fantasy. And yeah, I might be wearing my Grinch outfit to steal his playoff hopes and dreams, even though my team has not looked very good all season, admittedly. Lex asks, Pat Fryermuth, Higbee, Conklin, Mayer, or Chig O at tight end, replacing Goddard. Oh, man. You know, Conklin over the past few weeks has been getting targets, even though his snaps haven't been there. So it is risky, but I think that all of these guys are risky. So Conklin offers the most upside for me. So I'm going to go with Conklin, even in a less than ideal matchup. And I just lost my scroller again. Twitch gang in here. Hey guys, get Brees and Kelsey for Eckler and Kincaid. Should I accept full PPR? I would not do that trade. I think that Kincaid is, well, I would take the Eckler Kincaid side. I would say that. Kincaid is almost right up there with Travis Kelsey right now in terms of how valuable he is. I think even when Dawson Knox comes back, he's going to be. Brees Hall is such a good running back, but the state of that offensive line has me so worried. Nobody respects Zach Wilson as a passer. You've got Joe Tippmann listed as a center and a right guard. And then you've got Mekhi Becton, who is just perpetually questionable. It's too much. So it's not that I don't believe in his talent. I don't like his situation. And Eckler is in a much better situation. So I like that side. Anne says she has too much Howl or T-Law, Howl or Fields. I think this week we're rolling Howl out in pretty much all formats. I think that upside that he's got there, even in a very positive game script, is good. Um, we'll worry about that coming up over the next few weeks when his schedule turns a little bit tougher. So let's jump into the stardom situms. And, there are 4 teams on bye again this week. So I always want to preface this segment by saying if somebody is on the sit list and you don't have anyone to start over them, please don't go grab a scrub off the waiver wire and and plug them in just because you get scared. Go ahead and play your guy. It just may not be the best matchup. So this is just if you have other options to decide from. So continuing on our accountability check. I wish I had a bell in the background. Let's talk about some hits and misses from week 10. So I had several hits this week, surprisingly. Start Jared Goff. Yes. 23 of 33 for 333 yards and 2 touchdowns, 21.1 fantasy points. Another hit was start Javonte Williams, 79 rushing yards, 4 receptions for 31 yards and a touchdown. Check the box there. Sit Zach Moss, 1 carry for 2 yards. We'll check the box there. Sit Christian Watson, 2 receptions for 23 yards. We will check the box there. Now, some things that I did get wrong that were very unfortunate was to start DeAndre Hopkins. The target share was there. The matchup was there. Everything was aligned for him to have a big game. Unfortunately, he just couldn't come down with those targets, finishing with only 3 receptions for 27 yards. Another miss was to start Marquise Brown. I thought with Kyler Murray being back, that target share was going to go straight to him, but no, he only had 1 reception for 28 yards. What are you going to do? You win some, you lose some. As Howard Bender says, some days you're the dog and some days you're the hydrant. So let's jump into the stardoms. First off, I've got Brock Purdy at quarterback for the San Francisco 49ers. And with all his weapons back last week, Purdy was back, baby. 29.8 fantasy points in a very lopsided games against the Jaguars. Purdy has also been very consistently good at home, scoring at least 20 fantasy points in all of those games. This week, he gets the Bucks. And as much as they shut down Will Levis last week, they haven't been the best against the quarterback position, allowing the 6th most fantasy points per game and being very susceptible to wide receivers and running back receptions as well. So while Christian McCaffrey may not be able to run much against Vita Vea and the Tampa Bay defense, everything and everyone should be very much in play for this game, giving Purdy some big upside. Another guy that I like this week is Brian Robinson, running back for the New York Giants. And I wrote in my notes, point chasing? Me? Never. Now, I know Robinson had a big week against the Seahawks last week, scoring 27.7 PPR points, but I think he does it again this week against the Giants with literally everyone and their mother holding questionable tags. The Giants defense has not been good against the run. They're allowing the 9th most fantasy points to the position, ranking 30th in rush DVOA. Robinson kind of is a game script reliant guy, but this is the perfect matchup for him, especially if Antonio Gibson is out. Next up, I've got Jerome Ford, running back for the Cleveland Browns. Look, with a rookie quarterback, will the Steelers respect the run? I don't know, maybe. But last week, even against the Ravens defense, he carried the ball for 107 yards on 17 carries. He, outsnapped Kareem Hunt 50-20. So with a rookie quarterback, I really do expect the Browns to go very run heavy throughout this matchup and for Ford to see plenty of rushing volume. The Steelers have allowed an average of 4.5 rushing yards per attempt and 131 rushing yards per game. So I think that he should be a solid RB2 play this week, even with a rookie quarterback. So get him in your lineups as an RB2 or a flex if you can. Tank Dell is next, wide receiver Houston. And I swear, again, I'm not point chasing, but with Nico Collins banged up, Noah Brown out, Dell is in an absolute smash spot against the Cardinals this week. He didn't see the massive yardage that he saw in week 9, but he still did manage to score a touchdown and finished with 18.9 fantasy points. The Cardinals still rank 30th in pass DVOA and dead last in DVOA against the wide receiver one. So while we'll have to watch and see if Collins can go and bump Dell down in the depth chart, he should still be in line for a huge number of targets and yardage. Next up, I've got Deontay Johnson. And look, I know that he disappointed last week, but I feel like that egg laying was an anomaly. We're going back to him this week against the Browns. I really doubt Pittsburgh is going to be able to run on the Browns like they did against the Packers last week. So they're going to have to make some plays through the air. Both cornerbacks were questionable earlier in the week. So even though they're off the report, I'm like, are they healthy? Are they not? I think that if Johnson sees the target share that he should, he's back in business. Finally, I've got Trey McBride, as I mentioned earlier, the tight end for the Arizona Cardinals. And remember how so many people were nervous with Kyler Murray coming back, saying, "Oh, I don't know if McBride's going to get the target share that he's seen. Is Kyler Murray going to run the ball more? What's this offense going to look like?" Yeah, that was pretty silly. He finished Week 10 with 8 receptions on 9 targets for 131 yards, a career high, and now he gets the Houston Texans. The Texans have been decent against the wide receiver, but their weakness is at the tight end, where they've allowed the fourth most fantasy points and rank 25th in DVOA. You should look for another big week in what could probably be a big back and forth, with the Texans favored at 4 at home, but with Kyler Murray in there, you can't count anybody out. All right, before we jump into the sit-ems, Deadpool Raider asks, "I'm in a league that allows you to keep one rookie. What are some standout rookies you have your eye on?" Well, I think you just want your confirmation bias here, Deadpool, because it is Devon Achan. This guy has had such a stellar season, even though he has missed some time. I think that he probably could have come back if Miami didn't have the depth at running back and they just want him at 100%. He still leads the entire running back position in points per game. That guy is this explosive. And with Mostert getting older, with Jeff Wilson not having a good season, he is set to take on a much bigger role next season. So good for you. And also, yeah. Mile High Luke, great to see you. Happy Friday. Happy Friday to you as well. Um, Deadpool Reader also asks, with Jefferson and Achan iffy, I may need two. Hubbard, Quentin Johnston, Ty Chandler. Who would I pick? Not going Hubbard against Dallas's defense. I don't feel great with Quentin Johnston. If you look at his route tree, he's basically only successful on one type of route that he runs, and that is not good. But if you don't have any other options, that's what you got. I also really do like Ty Chandler. Um, I think you actually added one in up here as well. Najee Harris. Okay. Let me preface this by saying I would start Najee if Alexander Madison plays. If Madison doesn't play, I'm starting Chandler and Johnston. If he does play, I'm starting Harris and Johnston. So I just don't think Chandler is going to get the workload if Madison returns, if that makes sense. But yeah, it's you're really hoping for Jefferson and Achan, and I am too in a couple leagues. So we'll see what happens there. All right, let's move on to our sit-ems. First off, it's going to be Baker Mayfield for the Tampa Bay Bucks. And look, Baker did great for us last week, but this matchup against the 49ers just is not it. They are back at full strength, both on offense and defense, and they aren't playing around when it comes to stopping offenses. They are second in the league in points per game allowed, fourth in fantasy points allowed to the quarterback at just 13.7. And on the road, it's just really not set up to be a great day for Mayfield. Next up, I've got Isaiah Pacheco for Kansas City. And while the Eagles have been exploitable through the air, they have been very, very good at stopping the run. And that is why I cannot trust Pacheco this week. He's also only scored single digit fantasy points in his last 2 matchups against the Broncos and the Dolphins. So it's going to be really tough sledding to get him where he needs to be to deliver in fantasy against the Eagles. They rank second in rush DVOA and have given up the fewest fantasy points to running backs. So it's not the spot to start him this week. Another guy who's in a tough spot to start this week is Najee Harris. So, sure, I'm very glad. I'm very happy for Najee Harris because he has had some bounce back weeks as of late. He's found the end zone 3 times in the last 4 games with over 80 rushing yards in the last 2, but this just isn't really the spot to start him. The Browns rank 7th in rushing yards allowed per game, 7th in fantasy points allowed to the running back position. Then there's that pesky little fact that Jalen Warren has basically been splitting the snaps out of the backfield and was technically announced as the starter last week. So I want Najee to succeed more than anyone, but I just don't think that this is the week for it. Another guy who has a very, very tough matchup, who I don't think you should start or go anywhere near, is Gabe Davis this week, going up against the New York Jets. Our favorite boomer bust guy is making an appearance, and it's not in the correct category, unfortunately. So we are in no way thinking of starting Gabe Davis this week unless there is no other option. The Jets defense has been so good against opposing wide receivers that it even kind of makes you question playing guys like Stephon Diggs. They've allowed the fewest fantasy points to the wide receiver of anybody in the league. Diggs may be sort of matchup proof as he showed in week 1 against the Jets, but we know that Davis isn't. A matchup with Sauce Gardner and DJ Reed is just a nightmare for him. So I do not like that whatsoever. Another guy we talked about talent versus situation earlier is Amari Cooper. I am not starting Amari Cooper this week. And look, this is not a knock on his talent, but it's a situational thing. With Dorian Thompson Robinson starting, his value tanks, and it really sucks to have to sit a wide receiver of his caliber. But that's kind of where we're at this point. Finally, we're going to look at Kate Otten. He had a bad day against a good tight end defense last week, and I think he has another bad day against a very good 49ers defense. They rank 3rd in DVOA against the tight end, and that just doesn't set him up to produce. So, what are you going to do with that if you have Otten? I'm not saying drop him. He could be okay going forward, especially with the snap share, but this week just isn't the week. Um, excuse me. So let's move on to our favorite sneaky cheapies, which I always like to do for DFS purposes. Super, super fun. Our sneaky cheapies last week were Baker Mayfield, Zach Charbonnet, Michael Wilson, and Chega Conquo. They went 19.3, 10.2, 6.4, and 5.7. So no one really blew value out of the water, but no one laid a complete egg either. And that allowed me to get guys like Keenan Allen and Amon-Ra St. Brown in the same lineup. So the salaries are fairly high this week as well, which was just shocking to me when I looked at it. So we're going to need some cheaper options to fit in our studs. And these are my favorite cheap plays at the positions this week. For quarterback, as you can see on the screen, we're going to go with Brock Purdy. He's $5,900 on DraftKings. And we talked a little bit about why we like Brock Purdy in the stardom section, but his DFS salary really, really makes me like him here. Like we said earlier, he's put up at least 20 fantasy points in his home games this season, averaged averaging 25.3, which is a little more than 4 times value. And with all his weapons back against his weak secondary, I think he should be in for a very good day. Next up, I've got Devin Singletary for 5,300 on DK. I did, in full disclosure, write this out before we found out that Dameon Pierce was back at practice today. So that could change, but I think I still like Singletary. Even if Dameon Pierce is ready to go, Singletary is taking over the majority of the snaps out of this backfield. He gets a primo matchup against the Cardinals this week. They rank 28th in rush DVOA, and they've allowed the 3rd most fantasy points to the running back position. Houston has shown that they can be balanced on both sides of the ball when the time calls for it. And if Noah Brown is out, which he is, I wrote that before, it could lean to a heavier run game script. So I still like Singletary, even with Dameon Pierce, even if he is active. For wide receiver, I have Green Bay's Jaden Reed at 4,000 on DraftKings. And while Reed hasn't been out on the field as much as you like to see, when he is, he's getting the looks. He's had over 80 receiving yards in 2 out of the last 3 games. And while he can be a boomer bust play, the upside that you get with him against the Chargers this week is better than pretty much anything that you'll see all season. I talked a little bit more about this in my matchup previews over on fantasyalarm.com, but working against Yasir Taylor out of the slot is huge. That matchup is so good. And that Chargers pass defense is so bad. For tight end, we're going to go with Daniel Bellinger, $3,000 on DK. There aren't really a lot of options, admittedly, out there for a cheap tight end right now. So if you're paying down here, I like Daniel Bellinger. The Giants' pass game is garbage, but the Commanders have been favorable to quarterbacks and their passing options. And with limited options available to Tommy DeVito or Matt Barkley, whoever ends up starting at quarterback, I think we see a decent amount of Daniel Bellinger. So that wraps up our sneaky cheapies. We're going to take a quick break here so I can grab a little bit of a drink of water. When we come back, we're going to answer all your questions in the chat, and we're going to talk about Week 11 bold predictions. Throw your predictions in there, and we'll see you in a few minutes.
Of the NHL games, I had a conversation with Coop A Fiasco yesterday when we were producing High Stakes, and he was talking about playing video games. And since he covers fantasy football, I said, "Hey, are you going to be getting the new Madden this year?" And he goes, "Yeah, I don't really play Madden. I play NHL." And that tells you, and it really does, that I do feel that the NHL game is better than Madden. I feel like Madden is overrated. The NHL game is so realistic. I don't know if you guys saw the trailer and all the new additions that they added to this game, but it really looks good. I tried finding all the games that I had of NHL, and I thought I had a lot. I only have 4 of them. And that's because I used to live with my roommate and good friend who got me into hockey, and we would play most of it in his house. So he has most of the games, but I do got 21.
There you go.
I got
Okay.
NHL 18. We got Connor McDavid up there.
There you go.
NHL 12, I think, was the start of the new consoles for me. But the big one, the holy grail of NHL games, NHL 94 for the Sega Genesis, right there. Look at that. Look at that beautiful cover. Look, it looks like a VHS tape. That's how good this game was.
Now, let me stop you right there. So people, VHS tape, if you don't know, it's this like rectangular black plastic with the magnetic tape on the inside. Tape's this big. You put it in something called a VCR. For a little while, there was something called Beta that didn't last too long.
Look at this cartridge. I mean, they're not cartridges anymore. They're either discs or those little memory cards. But man, that thing is thick, right? And
you don't even need a cartridge or a disc anymore. You can buy the digital version.
And then you got Ron Barr on the book. I mean, he used to be always in the intro telling you about the team and what was going to be happening in the game. So NHL 94 is by far my favorite game, sports game. I love that game.
Welcome back, guys. Thanks for the break. I needed a little bit of water. Getting scratchy in the throat. We've got bold predictions coming up, but before we get to that, let's jump to some of your questions in the chat. I see Kyle in here. Hello, Kyle. Kyler versus Herbert, Hal versus Dobbs, Mahomes versus Kyler, Goff versus Kyler. We've got a lot of Kyler. So this week, I think I would go with Herbert against the Packers with Jair Alexander likely not playing. I think I'm still going to go with Sam Howell, as good as Josh Dobbs has been. My scroll just moved, so I lost the question. Mahomes versus Kyler. Yeah, we're going Mahomes and that Eagles pass defense. I know he's been hit or miss this season, but he's in a smash spot. And then Goff versus Kyler. That one is a little bit of a tough one. I think I would go Kyler here due to the rushing upside and probably the fact that the Lions run the ball a little bit more against the Bears. Lex Plant Some Trees asks, Khalil Herbert, Christian Watson, Jerry Jeudy, sit one in PPR. This one's a really, really tough question because at this point, I think you have to start who plays. We don't really know if Herbert is even going to be activated. Christian Watson's been limited. Jerry Jeudy has been limited. If I had to sit one, I think it would be Herbert and just try to get those PPR points from these receivers. But that is a very tough situation for you. Thank you for the comment on the graphics. That is our producer, Tony LaBarbara. Great job on those. Twitch gang Thursday in the chat. Thielen, Jacobs, and Pittman for Diggs, White, and Zay. I think that I don't know. It seems pretty lateral on its face. Depends on what you need, I think. But with Mark Andrews going out, I'm tempted for that Diggs, White, and Zay side because I think Zay gets a lot more work in there. Mr. Fly God, another Twitch gang. Great to see y'all in here. Do I start Ty Chandler or Pacheco? If Madison is active, you can't start Chandler. But if he's not, we are starting Chandler because we do not want a part of Pacheco going up against that Eagles run defense. That's just way too tough of a matchup. I think they're going to be throwing the ball all day long. So let's get into our week 11 bold predictions. And like I said, you guys throw y'all's in the chat. I always love to hear what you think are coming up. So I do, again, want to talk about some accountability here. So last week I said that Bill Belichick would lose to the Colts and get fired upon landing. Well, it was 50-50. They did lose to the Colts, but he wasn't fired. So we were halfway there. I also said that Washington would beat the Seahawks, and they were so close, but it just didn't work out. Something that I was pretty right on was that I had called out Keenan Allen to be the wide receiver 1 on the week, but the second part of that was Amon-Ra St. Brown was wide receiver 4 and not wide receiver 2. Then I absolutely dropped the 49ers call. So that's horrible. But we were close. We were sniffing. We were on the trail, and that leads us into week 11. Kyle dropping here in the chat. Breaking news. I haven't confirmed this, but Kyle is telling us that Burrow is out for the year with a torn ligament in his wrist. How did you guys let him play if he got off the bus with a wrap on his wrist? How did that medical team not look into this like more fully? What is going on here? I think that investigation is going to ramp up now, specifically that we have this news that he's out for the year. And now I'm sad because I have way too much Joe Burrow. Thanks, Kyle, for the bad news. No, I'm just kidding. Thanks for letting us know here in real time. So let's get into some of these week 11 bold predictions. I think, first off, that the Vikings and Joshua Dobbs defeat the Broncos on the road for their 5th straight win. And the only reason that I'm calling this a bold prediction is because the Broncos are favored in this game. So if you read my matchup previews on fantasyalarm.com, you know that I'm very, very high on the Vikings and Joshua Dobbs. The fact that they're 2.5-point underdogs is absolutely criminal. It's criminal. The Broncos defense has looked better, sure, but they barely got saved last week by a pass interference call that set up the field goal. And then when they missed the field goal, they got a second chance because of a too many men on the field penalty, even after getting 4 turnovers. I don't think that the winning streak against the Chiefs and the Bills is really what we're making it out to be. I think that it was a little fluky. And if Justin Jefferson is back, I like this call even more. Next, Jahmyr Gibbs is going to tie the rookie touchdown streak record set by Kevin Jones in 2014 and Barry Sanders in 1989. He's only one shy of getting there, and I think this matchup couldn't be better against the Bears. Apparently, and thank you to Andrew Cooper for dropping this little nugget of information. Last week against the Chargers, it was supposed to be David Montgomery at the goal line, but he subbed himself out to put Gibbs in there to get him that touchdown. With a record on the line, I think that Montgomery ends up doing that again. The Chargers have also allowed 1.4 rushing touchdowns per game, and I think that this one again goes to Gibbs, and he ends up tying that Lions rookie record. Next up, I think that Jordan Love throws for 300 yards and 3 touchdowns against the Los Angeles Chargers. This one could be the boldest of the week, okay? As Love has yet to do this in his career, but if there was any time to do it, what better time than now against this just putrid Chargers pass defense? They're allowing an average of almost 291 passing yards per game, and Love almost hit this mark last week with 289. So what better way to reassure Packers fans that you're the future than to throw for 303 touchdowns? Let's book it. I also think that Tony Pollard gets back on track and finally has a game over 100 yards and finally gets another touchdown. The Dallas Cowboys have had struggles in the run game, and I hate to see it as a Cowboys fan, but it's been particularly with Tony Pollard. Since week 1, where he scored 2 touchdowns against the Giants, he has not found the end zone since. But, and the huge but, is that this week he gets a matchup against the Panthers, where he should really be set up for a good day. They've allowed the second most fantasy points to the running back position, including 15 rushing touchdowns on the year and an average of 131 yards per game. If there was ever a get right moment, then it's now for Tony Pollard. Finally, I'm going to stick with Keenan Allen, and I'm going to say that he gets back-to-back weeks as the overall wide receiver 1 in PPR leagues. Yes, I know he's dealing with an AC joint sprain, so that's the only reason that I'm calling this bold, but the Packers secondary is extremely banged up right now. He's mainly going to work against Keyshawn Nixon out of the slot, and that matchup has a grade on PFF of 89.2, which you love to see. So last week, even going out of the game for a while, Allen saw a 35% target share, and Nixon is allowing a completion percent of 74.3% of targets thrown his way. If Allen continues to see that target share, he's absolutely going to feast. So those are mine. I'm curious to see what you guys have going on in the chat. Sellers in here, always the Gabe Davis guy. Gabe Davis goes for 100 yards and 2 touchdowns because no one is on him this week, and he's going to put up 30 points on benches. I would love for that to happen for you. I know what a big Gabe Davis truther you are. But the fact is, he's got a matchup with DJ Reed and Sauce Gardner. It's going to be very, very tough. But you know what? Joe Brady's taking over as offensive coordinator. So maybe there's going to be a little bit of magic sprinkled in here that we haven't seen in weeks prior. Rex, great to see you in here. Have to look and see if you can grab him for cheap. I'm assuming Burrow in a keeper league. Yeah. I mean, if they're a contending team, especially, go grab him. Thank you for throwing water on the donkeys. It's not anything personal. I think that their win streak has been overrated. They beat the Chiefs with Patrick Mahomes having the flu. And then, like I said, they almost couldn't even win with 4 turnovers. They just got gifted, gift after gift after gift. So let's pump the brakes on them a little bit. Kyle is asking Deontay Johnson over Devonta Smith, Rashee Rice, Dubs, Kincaid, Chandler, and Michael Wilson, full PPR. I might play him over Devonta Smith, and I would play him over Chandler if Madison is starting. Michael Wilson, yeah, I would play him over Michael Wilson. I would definitely bench Wilson. I think he's more of a stash. He needs more time to develop some chemistry with Kyler Murray, but I think he will. He's the biggest guy in the wide receiver room by 3 inches, I think. So he's going to have his time. It's just going to take a little time to develop. And like I said, that Houston's pass defense has been really good. Sellers also saying all the Gibbs. I love it. I love it. You love it. You're also saying Rico Dowdle week. We had a discussion about this on Lightning Round on Tuesday. It very well could be, but I don't think it's going to be until late in the game. I don't think that they're going to necessarily pull the starters until they've got this thing locked up. But maybe he could find the end zone because it is a very good matchup, even if he is in as a backup. So Rex says a buddy of mine has now lost Watson, Jones, Burrow, and Richardson in the same team. Can we start a GoFundMe or a gift basket or something? Like, this guy has had a horrible fantasy year. Also, tell him to burn some sage because that is just some horrible, horrible luck. You don't lose quarterbacks like that, especially on the same team. Oh man, I feel for you. And then Freezy, Lamar for Derrick Henry. I have Hurts. Derrick Henry hasn't done that much. It depends on what the rest of your team looks like and what you need. Hurts has also been, not to make a pun here, but hurt later on in the season. He's been dealing with a knee injury. We've seen him deal with ankle injuries, things like that, being a rushing quarterback. I think I would hold on to Lamar just in case something happens because, as we just mentioned, quarterbacks are going down like flies. So let's move on to our final segment here. And you guys know that we have a brand new partner here on Britt's Fantasy Blitz, and you know them, you love them. It is Sleeper. I'm sure you house a lot of your leagues on their platform, but now with Sleeper, there is just so much more about the platform to enjoy. One of those being Sleeper Picks. You can choose 2 or more players, multiply your entry up to 100 times, and you can choose and mix and match from NFL, NBA, college sports, and more. If your fantasy season is in the toilet, which with all these quarterback injuries, it could be, there are also single week drafts that you can enter to keep your fantasy season going. To sign up today, new users get a 100% deposit match up to $100 when they use code VAULT3. So take advantage of this offer on your mobile device. So download the Sleeper app or scan our QR code up there on the screen and start participating in the Sleeper Picks contest. Also, if you're a first time depositor, Sleeper also has some discounted special picks just for you, usually. I haven't heard what they have going on for this week, but if you sign up today, make sure that you check out those special picks. If you have been playing Sleeper Picks, these are my favorite going into week 11. First off, Jalen Hurts, 233.5 passing yards. I'm going to go more at a 1.78 time multiplier. Hurts has hit this mark in 3 out of his last 4 games, and in a game that should be very back and forth, I expect him to hit it once again. The Chiefs defense has been good against the pass, which is very surprising. I mean, their defense has kept them in some of these games that they otherwise may have lost, but Hurts has exploited tougher pass defenses like the Jets, things like that. I think that Hurts hits this easily. So 23 and a half passing yards, going more. Next up, I've got Jahmyr Gibbs, 24.5 receiving yards. You guessed it. I'm going to go more. 1.75 times. Guys, we're not putting the genie back in this bottle. Gibbs has hit this in 3 consecutive games, and the Bears have allowed an average of 6 receptions per game to the running back position. When working as a receiver, Gibbs is also averaging 6.45 yards per reception, so I think he should easily be able to achieve this, maybe even in the first half, if you wanted another bold prediction. Next up, we've got Austin Eckler, 17.9 fantasy points. I'm going to go more at 1.77 times. It took him a while after coming back from injury to get going, but since then, he's hit this mark in 3 consecutive games, and now he gets the Green Bay Packers, who are allowing 22.3 fantasy points per game to the running back position. Eckler also has upside in this fantasy point world because of his work in the passing game. So he should have another great day against a beat up Green Bay Packers defense. On the flip side of that game, I'm going to go Luke Musgrave, 28.5 receiving yards. And I'm going to go, you guessed it, more at 1.76 times. Look, he's not looked at that often, which is a little bit concerning. But when he is, the targets have been deep targets with an average of 7.8 yards per target that ranks 7th out of all tight ends. He's also hit this receiving mark in 6 out of the 9 games that he's played this season. And I believe in 2 of the ones that he didn't play, he came out for injury. So I really, really like where this stat is set, and I'm taking more. Finally, I'm going to stick with tight ends, and I'm going to go Travis Kelce, 75.5 receiving yards, and I'm going to go more. This one may be a little bit more up in the air as, Kelce has kind of been a little bit hit or miss lately, but with Taylor Swift expected to attend, the numbers lean towards a big day for him. The Eagles also rank dead last in DVOA versus the tight end, and Kelce is not your ordinary guy. So those are my 5 favorite sleeper picks for this Sunday's matchup. If you play all 5, it's a 17.27 times entry. So if you haven't signed up yet for sleeper picks, go to fantasyalarm.com/sleeper, use the promo code VAULT3, and first-time users get a 100% deposit match up to $100. If you've got your phone sitting on you, go ahead and scan that QR code. We made it easy for you. You click and scan, and then you're in. And we will be doing some weekly drafts like we talked about coming up soon. So stay tuned to our Fantasy Alarm Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it. And we'll be putting out some more details from that as we get closer to doing some of those drafts going forward. So that about wraps up the show. I want to thank you guys first and foremost for tuning in to another Friday episode of Britt's Fantasy Blitz. But I also want to talk about what Rex is just spilling the tea on about his friend. He drafted Richardson one pick before you. He rejected a trade offer for Watson this weekend. He plays you this week with Burrow, and he traded for Jones right before the injury. Man, you were out here throwing your buddy under the bus. Again, let's start a GoFundMe. Let's send this guy sage. Let's send this guy cinnamon, all the protection. Like he needs it. I'm not laughing because I'm happy. That's just very, very bad luck. So Nino, Monty first touchdown score. I like that. I can very much get behind that. And then Daniel, yes, Joe Burrow out for the year. Yeah, we're pretty screwed, I think. I'm not quite sure. I'm very interested, I guess I should say, in what is going on and what was going on behind the scenes with his wrist before that game started and what happened. Um, it's it's just heartbreaking because he was looking very good after finally coming back from the calf. And it's going to be very hard to find a quarterback at this point in the year. So, oh man, we'll just prayers up to all the Joe Burrow fantasy managers. But that wraps up our show today, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. Again, if you haven't downloaded the Bettercast app, go to the Apple app and Google Play stores and jump in there with us. We'll have some for Thanksgiving. We'll have some for Sunday night. We've also got trivia. It's a pretty fun thing. Also, if you don't have the Fantasy Alarm All Pro subscription, go to fantasyalarm.com/win. Use promo code Let's Go for 50% off your first monthly payment, or scan that QR code and it'll take you right to it. Coming up on the Better Sports Network and Fantasy Alarm YouTube channels from 4 to 5 p.m. Eastern, we've got the Better Sports Betting Show with Dan Servadidio and Howard Bender, followed 5 to 6 p.m. Eastern with the NBA DFS Live with John Impemba and James Grande. And guys, I'm coming back on Mondays. I will be here on Monday, same channel, 2 p.m. Eastern on Mondays and Fridays going forward. Make sure you tune in, check that out. Check out our sleeper picks articles that are dropping. Check out the matchup previews, everything that we've got going on at Fantasy Alarm. If you have start-sit questions on Sunday morning, check out myself and John Impemba at 9 a.m. Eastern, Howard Bender and Andrew Cooper on Sirius XM at 10 a.m. Eastern, and then right back here with Coop and Impemba to wrap it up for you at 11 a.m. But speaking of wrapping it up, that wraps our show. Y'all have a great weekend, and as always, thanks for getting blitzed.